Okay, so this next one. Let me start the question the way I normally would, as opposed to reading the passage. So we know we're going to be asked about conventions of standard English. On the real test, you won't know which questions are where, so you should always check. That's what we're dealing with. I look down and I see all the languages the same, and I have a period, nothing at all, a semicolon, and a comma. Okay, so now go back to our idea of equivalencies. In most cases, a semicolon, answer choice C, is equivalent to a period, answer choice A. The only exception to that is the idea of a super comma. So the first place you go after you see these options A and C, you go through and scan to see if there's any other semicolons. Because if there's 2 or 3 semicolons, maybe we have a super comma situation, a complex list. But if you look through this, you don't see that. There's no other semicolons. Therefore, answer choice A and C are functionally equivalent. They separate 2 full sentences, and technically one cannot be right and the other one wrong. They can't ask you to make a sort of stylistic choice in this standardized test here. So we can cross those answers off, and now we're left with a simple question, a no comma or a comma. So commas are very flexible, but there are some things you can rely on here. So among is what's called a preposition. And if you're lost about that phrase, if you're like, what is a preposition? I'll just show you some of them. There's a huge list of them. If you look it up on the internet, you can find a massive list of prepositions. But the simple ones are words like of, in, from, let's see. That's a good list. I mean, there are many, and I may have missed one in here, but those are some good prepositions. Those little words that connect things, okay? So I want you to think that like prepositions connect and commas break things apart, okay? So in most cases, you will not put a comma next to a preposition because they are doing opposite things. Commas break things up, prepositions connect things. So let's just, for example here, let's look at these other prepositions. Notice that we have poems and we have the writer of the poems. It would be, this word of helps us understand the relationship between these words. The technical definition of a preposition is a word that shows positional relationship. Preposition. So what do we mean about positional relationship? That can seem a little abstract because a person and a poem, we don't really think in terms of position because positional relationship almost sounds like spatial relationship, right? But the poems are of Thomas Tranströmer. I think I'm saying that name right. Actually, I think I'm saying it wrong. Who knows? But what that word of does is link the poems to Thomas in some way, right? It shows us the relationship between those two. It would be strange to put a comma there, right? The same thing about in. In is connecting images to crisp, right? And it's really connecting images to crisp, spare language, right? So this preposition links these ideas, and we wouldn't want to break them up, right? So one more, from. Praise from leading contemporary writers. Okay, so what we're doing is we're linking the idea of praise and leading contemporary writers. We don't want to break those ideas up because from is connecting them. Now, I've done these questions before, but I haven't memorized them. I don't know which one of these two is right yet. I've just set the table so that you understand that prepositions usually don't go with commas. I don't know that that's the case here. This is a hard question, and I don't know if the normal rules will apply to this particular situation. Okay, so let me now analyze this sentence to choose between B and, crossed off the wrong one, between B and D. Okay, so let me show you how I would do that. I'm noticing the verb have earned. and that links to the subject, which is typically the first few words of a sentence or the first few words of a clause, right? So really what we have here, I'll cross this piece off to simplify, and I'll even cross off the prepositional phrase to simplify. The haiku-like poems, see this set of commas working like parentheses here and here? The haiku-like poems have earned the poet praise from leading contemporary writers. Now, remember our rules about commas? One of the rules was an IC, comma, DC, right? So the reason I paused there is I'm thinking, do I have a full sentence here? Indeed, I do. Okay, so let me get rid of all my chicken scratch and once again show you. So we have these two commas. These two commas are a parenthetical set of commas, right? By the way, this little comma is just separating two adjectives that describe the language, right? I have this prepositional phrase which adds to the idea, the haiku-like poems of Thomas Tranströmer, but I could just say the haiku-like poems. I mean, I could really just say the poems. And the poems have earned, right? Who or what have earned the poet praise? The poems have earned, again, crossing off extra language, the poet praise from leading contemporary writers. That could be a sentence. The poems have earned the poet praise from writers. Okay? So I could stop there so long as I don't have another full sentence here. And we're going to start with the word among. Among them, Nigerian-American essayist and novelist Teju Cole. So I could simplify that. Among them, Teju Cole. And here's a comma. So now let's run our little test. Hey, guess what? The poems have earned the poet praise from leading writers. That's a sentence. Right? Or even the poems have earned the poet praise. That's a sentence. Now let's try the next part. Hey, guess what? Among them, Teju Cole. Imagine just walking to a room and saying that. That's not a complete thought, right? We usually don't start sentences with prepositions, by the way. And let's try the next part just to be clear. So, by the way, here's that sentence wrecker so you know where we're going with this. Hey, guess what? Who has written that the works contain a luminous simplicity? Not a full sentence. It could work as a question, but not as a statement, right? So it wrecks the sentence. If you changed who to another subject, like he has written that Tranströmer's works contain a luminous simplicity. That's a sentence. Hey, guess what? He has written that the works contain a luminous simplicity, right? That feels like a full idea. Now, why am I going into all that detail? Well, because now I know that it would be okay to put a comma here because I could have an independent clause and then a dependent clause. I still haven't disproved B yet. I've just proved the likelihood of that D is sort of acceptable. So now we'll go back to the fundamental idea about the preposition. Prepositions link things, commas break things apart. In this case, we do want to break these things apart. Why? Because if we don't put a comma here, then among will link writers to them. So it sounds like writers become a subgroup of some unnamed group, them, some otherwise unnamed group, right? Them is a pronoun. It refers back to a previously mentioned group. But we don't have a previously mentioned group. You wouldn't put the pronoun them. You would say, well, what, the writers? Aren't they just writers, Jeremy? Isn't that the pre-mentioned group? Yes, but why would you put the pronoun only one word after you've said the noun? You usually don't do that, right? And using the word among, which means sort of within, right? Sort of nested in between, right? Within a larger group. So we wouldn't say that the writers are nested in between the writers, right? We wouldn't say a group is within itself, right? So in this very hard question, the general rule about prepositions, we see that that general rule doesn't apply to this particular situation, right? Among them has to refer back to writers, and it can't do so unless we break it apart. If we break this apart, then this next phrase almost becomes its own phrase, starting here with among them all the way to the end. So now we can refer back to writers because we've got enough of a break in between. Otherwise, what are we talking about? Right? So that is a very challenging question, and one for which the general rule does not apply. This is why we can't just rely on intuition on the hardest of questions. I know I'm going into great detail on these questions, but it's so that you don't feel like I'm making any assumptions about how you think through these punctuation rules. These are challenging questions. They require careful attention to detail. Okay? And if it feels like, wow, that's super hard, fair enough. I understand. That's why I'm showing you the hardest ones. Now you can go practice a question like that in the medium category and feel like you're not just relying on intuition, right?